everyone, and my name is Karen Dubin. I am the Chief Operating Officer for the Sweet Institute, and I have been reading with you Carl Rogers on Becoming a Person, and I'm going to continue that today with we're going to start part 3, the process of becoming a person. I have observed the process by which an individual grows and changes in a therapeutic relationship. So here we go. Chapter 5. Some of the directions evident in therapy. In part 2, although there are some brief descriptions of the process of change in the client, the major focus was on the relationship which makes changes possible. In this and the following chapter, the material deals in a much more specific way with the nature of the client's experience of change in himself. I have a personal fondness for this chapter. It was written in 1951 to 1952, at a time when I was making a real effort to let myself sense and then express the phenomenon which seems central to therapy. My book, Client-Centered Therapy, had just been published, but I was already dissatisfied with the chapter on the process of therapy, which had, of course, been written about 2 years previously. I wanted to find a more dynamic way of communicating what happens to the person. So I took the case of one client whose therapy had had much significance for me, one which I was also studying from a research point of view, and using this as the basis try to express the tentative perceptions of the therapeutic process which were emerging in me. I felt very bold and very unsure of myself in pointing out that in successful therapy, clients seem to come to have a real affection for themselves. I felt even more uncertain in voicing the hypothesis that the core of man's nature is essentially positive. I could not then foresee that both of these points would receive increasing support from my experience. The process of psychotherapy, as we have come to know it from a client-centered orientation, is a unique and dynamic experience. Different for each individual, yet exhibiting a lawfulness and order which is astonishing in its generality. As I have become increasingly impressed by the inevitability of many aspects of this process, I likewise grow increasingly annoyed at the type of questions which are so commonly raised in regard to it. Will it cure compulsion neurosis? Surely you don't claim that this will erase a basic psychotic condition. Is it suitable for dealing with marital problems? Does it apply to stutterers or homosexuals? Are the cures permanent? These questions and others like them are understandable and legitimate, just as it would be reasonable to inquire whether gamma rays would be an appropriate cure for chilblains. They are, however, it seems to me, the wrong question to ask if we're trying to further a deep knowledge of what psychotherapy is or what it may accomplish. In this chapter, I should like to ask what appears to me a sounder question in regard to this fascinating and lawful process which we term therapy, and to attempt a partial answer. Let me introduce my question this way. Whether by chance, by insightful understanding, by scientific knowledge, by artistry of human relationships, or by a combination of all these elements, we have learned how to initiate a discernible process which appears to have a core of sequential orderly events, which tend to be similar from one client to another. We know at least something of the attitudinal conditions for getting this process underway. We know that if the therapist holds within himself attitudes of deep respect and full acceptance for this client as he is, and similar attitudes toward the client's potentialities for dealing with himself and his situations, if these attitudes are suffused with sufficient warmth, which transforms them into the most profound type of liking or affection for the core of the person, and if a level of communication is reached so that the client can begin to perceive that the therapist understands the feelings he is experiencing and accepts him at the full depth of that understanding, then we may be sure that the processes are already initiated. Then, instead of trying to insist that this process serve the ends we have in mind, no matter how laudable those goals may be, let us ask the only question by which science can genuinely be advanced. This question is, what is the nature of this process? What seem to be its inherent characteristics? What direction or directions does it take? And what, if any, are the natural endpoints of the process? When Benjamin Franklin observed the spark coming from the key on his kite string, he did not, fortunately, fall under the spell of its immediate and practical uses. Instead, he began to inquire into the basic process which made such a phenomenon possible. Though many of the answers which we put forward were full of specific errors, the search was fruitful because the right question was being asked. Thus, I am making a plea that we ask the same question of psychotherapy, and ask it with an open mind, that we endeavor to describe, study, and understand the basic process which underlies therapy, rather than attempting to warp that process to fit our clinical needs or our preconceived dogma or the evidence from some other field. Let us patiently examine it for what it is in itself. And I am going to stop there. It seems like a good natural pause, and we will continue on tomorrow at the last paragraph on page 75, and continue on to the next section, and perhaps we will have a shorter read tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. But that's it for today. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you again very soon.